Thank you for staying with us. Now, Report Desk Africa starts in East Africa, particularly Kenya, where the country has been witnessing unrest in the past few weeks. Now, although tensions seem to have eased following President William Ruto's withdrawal of the financial bill in his public address, Kenyans are still gutted by the events that preceded the protest. Now, the protest, which is now called #RejectFinancialBill 2024, pulled significant momentum online and offline. Now, the recorded cases of missing people, illegal arrests, and abductions of young activists in Kenya is sparking, different conversations all over the globe. Before we continue with this conversation, let's take a look at what President William Ruto said in his public address.
I send my condolences to the families of those who lost their loved ones in this very unfortunate manner. Consequently, having reflected on the continuing conversation around the content of the Finance Bill 2024 and listening keenly to the people of Kenya who have said loudly that they want nothing to do with this Finance Bill 2024, I concede, and therefore I will not sign the 2024 Finance Bill, and it shall subsequently be withdrawn, and I have agreed with these members that that becomes our collective position. With the deficits that now exist, together, and as I committed last Sunday, I will be proposing an engagement with the young people of our nation, our sons and daughters, for us to listen to them. As I said on Sunday, listen to their views, listen to their proposals, their ideas, their concerns, and what they think we should do better as we go forward. I am also recommending a multi-sectoral, bipartisan, multi-stakeholder engagement from civil society, religious organizations, professional bodies, for us as a nation to speak to the future of our country, for immediate further austerity measures to reduce expenditure, starting with the office of the president.
All right, there's so many conversations surrounding this development, and some of the conversations we'll be having today are, the fact that the voice of the masses were actually heard. That's a very rare phenomenon, especially in this part of the world. That's one. The casualties that were unfortunately recorded, that's two. The substitute for what will be done now that the president has decided to concede, that's three. And then we also hear that there are rumors that despite all of this, the youth are still saying that their trust have been broken regardless, and they're calling for the president to step down. We want to ascertain the veracity of that claim as well. So now we're joined by our guests on the show. First, we have Declan Galvin, the Managing Director of Exigent Risk Advisory, joining us all the way from Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you so much, Declan, for joining us.
Thank you.
A pleasure. We also have Dorothy Otieno, a political analyst all the way from New York. Thank you, Dorothy, for joining us as well.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Now, first off, Declan, what would you say, I mean, you're currently in Kenya, what would you say is the current state of the country? We see that, the youth have come out to clamor for a change. They've asked that this bill would not even be passed, and the president has conceded and said that he will not move further with it, and he has decided to go along with, listening to the youth, their suggestions, their ideas, which is something that, that doesn't exactly sound very common around here, but we still see that there's a bit of unrest here and there. What could be the possible reason, and what's the general mindset of the youths and Kenyans generally at this point?
So I think we need to just recognize how historic and unprecedented the events over the last week, but in particular the last 48 hours, have been in Kenya. The size of these protests, led by youth, it's a leaderless movement, the breaching of parliament, the violence toward unarmed protesters who were exercising their constitutional rights, followed by Ruto's first speech, not the one that you showed, but the first one, which was widely considered to be tone deaf and disrespectful, according to contacts that I've been speaking with. And then what's ostensibly a public knife fight between the deputy president and the director general of the National Intelligence Service. These events are simply harrowing, and that is kind of very much what is driving the conversation today. Definitely, there's still tension. We still have demonstrators who've chosen to go to CBD. We have people who were attempting to go to State House. There are, of course, demonstrations throughout the country and other cities and towns. But I don't want to suggest that the tension is as high as it was on Tuesday, when Ruto conceded and said that the finance bill will not go through as is, and that there will be some measure of dialogue. This really kind of scaled back a lot of the tension and frustration, and is frankly, I think, if you speak with Kenyans across the country, what he should have really been doing over the weekend as opposed to after the events on Tuesday.
Thank you so much. I almost feel like we're not even going to have enough time to discuss this, because it's the hottest conversation coming out of Africa at the moment. Dorothy, I want to come to you now. I was reading something, and it was almost like, somewhere saying that this is a classic case of, good things coming out of, or when I say good things that came out wrong. Now, here's what I'm saying. We all know that in this bid to raise about an extra $2.7 billion US domestic revenue and pay up Kenya's debts, President Ruto proposed an increase or increment in the taxes, which is what we're seeing now, or what we saw back then. Now, what we do not know is, did this bill align with Kenya's long-term economic development strategy? Was he trying to do something good that eventually turned out bad?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think for me, it's about going back to the history of when the new government came into place, and they were, went to the public and declared that they have found empty, the office was empty when they get into the office. And so the issue of our president always, taking loans and getting us into deep debts has been a problem for the majority of the citizens. And it happens that, some of these debts are done without the consultation of the critical people who needs to make, decisions pertaining the governance of the country. So that has always been there. And just like you said, our president, we've gotten to a point where we can no longer trust him because what he says and what he does usually are on the contrary. And so for us, the issue of now, increasing the finance bill, and number one, it's coming from him. It's not coming from, from the people. The priorities of the peoples are not taken into consideration when this finance bill is being formulated. So it's not the bottom-up approach as he envisages in his manifesto. It is more of, a top-down approach where orders are coming from above. And even the parliamentarians, unfortunately, are not able to question some of these things. And because it is unfortunate that our parliament right now, the numbers are pro the ruling party or pro the government. And so even in terms of, passing bills and policies in the parliament, there is, outright biasness, or, we already know that there is no objectivity when it comes to passing those laws. So we are at a disadvantaged point where the citizens feel like, the directions we are taking is not really putting the mwananchi, or the mamamboga as we call it. So mwananchi is the person on the ground, or the person of interest into all these negotiations that are happening. So our president has been, traveling and taking debts from here and there, and the burden is felt by the local wananchi, local citizens. The people who are at the grassroots are the ones who are feeling this pinch. And so that has really, really caused anger and, provoked people to what we are currently seeing happening in Kenya, which is very unfortunate.
All right. Thank you, Dorothy, for that. Now, I'm going to come back to Declan. We understand that Kenya has been burdened with a heavy debt crisis, and this is not the first time. And that's among other African countries, talking about Zambia. Nigeria is also in debt. Ghana is also in debt. Lots of other African countries. In fact, there's now a theory that it's taking us all the way back to colonialism because we borrow and borrow all the more, but we do not have the resources to pay back. And, we're seeing now that one of the reasons why this bill was supposed to be introduced was to raise extra fund so as to service the debts. That doesn't necessarily mean that they can pay off all at once. But now that it has been recalled, a lot of times we get all gooey and sentimental when it comes to what affects the people. But now that this has been recalled, what are the potential economic implications that we are expecting to see from withdrawing the Finance Bill 2024? Declan, that's for
question. And it's hard to succinctly answer because it really does touch on so many different elements. But I'll make two points. The first point is yes, pulling back on the finance bill does raise questions around the kind of Kenya's the overall kind of risk and investment risk in Kenya, because some but not the majority of spending for Kenya was to be for external debt, but again not always as much as what people think. So that's the first one. So there is a kind of a negative consequence to that. But what I think matters is, from an economic perspective, the risk of having these continuous protests throughout the country is much greater and has much more economic damage than not pulling the bill back. And I think that those are really kind of.
Declan, are you there? Okay, okay. Declan, can you hear us?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, I think we lost your signal for a bit there. You were wrapping up the point you were making.
So just two things. Apologies for we've had internet issues, as you know, in Kenya. On the one hand, yes, there's a risk by pulling back the finance bill because it makes people wonder whether Kenya will service its debts or pay its bills. But that is not as large of a risk as allowing the country to continue to protest and to riot and to have all of this violence on the streets and state abuses. That is a much bigger economic risk to Kenya, and I think that's how we really need to think about it.
And speaking about the protests and riots, we're going to come to that in a bit. But before then, coming to you, Dorothy. Now, yes, the president has said that he's going to withdraw the bill. But then, what alternative measures does President Ruto propose to address the physical challenges that prompted the Financial Bill 2024 in the first place?
Yeah, thank you so much. And let me just add something to what Declan talked about. We feel like our government is more reactive than proactive. Kenya is a very, I would say, volatile country, as you can look at the history of Kenya, where, citizens have always taken up their space and their sovereignty in terms of the governance of the country. And during elections, Kenya is usually very active in terms of demanding for accountability, during elections and anything pertaining to government. So our president is also not, he's in a place where we will say he's not very sensitive to the political temperature of the country, having known the way the politics of Kenya operate and how fragile the political space is, and even the civic space of Kenya. The other thing, I feel like when issues to do with the basics that are concerning the citizens, then that one is a reason for people to come out and demand for accountability. And this has not been there Kenya, our constitution allows for, we elect representatives to go and represent our views. And there are certain procedures that are put in place when it comes to formulating policies. And of course, the public participation, before the bill can even go to the parliament, there is a process that is followed to ensure that this bill is inclusive in terms of having the opinion of the citizenry in place. That has not really been looked at deeply, and what we are seeing in this 13th parliament is a rush where, like I said, the top-bottom approach in terms of orders are given, and it has to be done in a certain way, which sometimes contravene what the Constitution demands. I will tell you, for example, the second reading or during the voting, it was so amazing that, that this bill was passed in a record 2 hours. And people are wondering what was the rush, because the Constitution allows for a timeline for this bill to be passed. So there was a rush, and our president, unfortunately, will be seen in several areas, telling citizens that, we need this bill to be passed so that we can continue with the work. And so he was, on the other hand, he was pro the bill, and he was, I want to say, the negotiator or among the people who initiated this bill without really engaging the Kenyans. So when issues to do with food, issues to do with, land are touched on, those are very sensitive issues that are really, Kenyans feel like, their honors is taken in terms of the governance of the country. Yet I want to say that the president, yes, I understand the first public announcement, of course, left us all, wondering, and it was provocative, and, we felt like it was not remorseful, and it was a dare sort of, statement that the president made. But even the second one, and of course, based on the different, statement that we are getting from the deputy president and other, stakeholders, is that he is still proposing. For me, he's proposing, if the issue is with the youth, I had hoped that he would call the youth and listen to their ideas instead of him proposing. And that has been the trend, where the president is proposing, but in real sense, those are orders that should be taken into consideration. So I think it's time that our president also listen to the people of Kenya. And right now, it's not an issue about the citizens, it's not the issue about the youth. Now everybody is concerned, and we have seen a new trend of Gen Z, the young generation, coming up to claim their power and the space to be able to defend injustice to them.
All right, Dorothy, thank you for that. I'm just going to ask one final question, and that will be directed at Declan. Now, we asked you before we went live what the situation was in Kenya, and you said that there was still a bit of unrest here and there. Now, we understand that the citizens invaded the country's Senate House, and the president has said that, he has conceded and he's no longer going to take action. So what is the cause of the continuance of the protest? Because a lot of people are speculating, and it seems as though there are two faces to this. Are they just being unnecessarily apprehensive? It's one thing for the government to say they will, and then after everything it has settled, we see that they just go ahead and do what they want to do. We see that in a lot of African countries, including ours. But there's another aspect of it where people think that the youths have just become unnecessarily hysterical, because now they're out there, they have the power, they have the voice, and they just want to, impose that and leave a lasting mark. So what exactly is the reason for this unrest? Because it's risky. It has become fatal because there are casualties recorded already. Why has it not been put to rest?
So the finance bill is the manifestation of a whole range of social and economic grievances in the country. So it was the consolidation of this. And it is, but it is by no means the only problem. Right now, we have a number of youth who were reportedly abducted, and they're still missing. We have a number of youth who were armed with water bottles, who were gunned down. We have a whole range of police abuses, which has been identified by the Independent Police Oversight Authority. The country is not ready to move on, but again, by removing the finance bill, it allowed for a moment for people to say, okay, we're going to start to rethink some of this. And for those people who think that the youth are out unnecessarily, just being aggravated, regardless if you think that it's necessary or not, this is their constitutional right. It is their constitutional right to conduct civil disobedience, to push back against government policies that they don't like, to be in front of the Parliament and the National Assembly. There's nothing untoward about any of that. And so I think that the people who are deciding to criticize these protesters for behaving peacefully are the people who are being more hysterical rather than the protesters themselves.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us on this. And where we do hope that this protest will come to an end and that the people of Kenya will eventually celebrate in the end, because basically it's all about the people. You know, there were some celebrations when William Ruto won the election. I remember that a lot of people were rooting for him. Unfortunately, now things have seemed to turn south. But once again, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see the end of this protest sooner than later. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to very quick break now. When we come back, we will be remaining in Lagos, Nigeria, where the rains that should have been bringing us peace and joy is now bringing us trouble because there's flooding in many parts of Lagos. Do stay with us.